Hello, and welcome to another installment in the Law & Order video series. We are straying a little bit away from horror today and looking into the story behind Detroit Become Human. I love these narrative type games, and although it isn't necessarily horror, it still housed some pretty creepy moments. The game itself is set in a futuristic Detroit, USA, with the main part of the game taking place over the course of 6 days. The city has integrated androids into their everyday life, but things start to change dramatically and a civil war is brewing. There will be spoilers in this one, so if you haven't played this game and you want to, please be warned. So the plot in the game actually flits back and forth in the timeline, so we will look at it chronologically as events happen in the game. Also, this plot explains the game with the idea of a good ending. Given that this game has around 40 endings, my playthrough and certain key decisions may differ from yours. August 15th, 2038. An android called Connor, who works with law enforcement, is called to negotiate a hostage situation. A deviant android, or rather an android who has turned rogue if you like, called Daniel has killed one of his owners and taken their young child Emma hostage. The situation is serious as Daniel is standing on the edge with Emma and threatens to jump off the edge with the girl. Connor successfully manages to avoid the death of the girl. This can happen one of many ways, but for the sake of this story he completes his objective and saves Emma. Around 3 months later in November of that year, a domestic android named Markus has been tasked by his owner to collect some paint from a store in town. He collects the paint but is attacked by some demonstrators who oppose the existence of androids due to job losses, etc. The police intervene and Markus boards a bus and makes it back to the master's house. His master is Carl Manfred, a painter. An elderly man, Carl requires care to manage his health conditions and Markus fills that role. It's revealed that Carl has a son, Leo, a drug addict who turns up asking for money. Leo turns hostile towards Markus, but eventually leaves with nothing. Later that afternoon, a man named Todd Williams picks up a replacement housemaid android named Kara from the Cyberlife store and takes it home. They arrive and Kara gets to work tidying and doing some cleaning. She finds a stash of drugs known as red ice, hidden by Todd in the washing powder, and he attacks Kara, telling her to stay out of his stuff. Todd claimed the previous Kara model he owned was hit by a car, but this is found out to be false. Todd is a violent man whose wife left him, and he frequently subjects his young daughter Alice to beatings and abuse. Kara quickly befriends Alice. Hours later, Kara has made dinner for Todd and Alice, but Todd gets violent again, striking Alice, who runs upstairs. Todd mentions he's going to teach her a lesson, and after ordering Kara to stay there, she seems to gain an ability to defy him and breaks through a kind of barrier, becoming what is known as a deviant. Making her way upstairs, she successfully manages to save Alice. Todd is either killed or survives, and they board a bus to safety. Meanwhile, after arriving back home from a cocktail party, Carl and Markus find the studio lights on, and it's Carl's son Leo. He's broken in and is stealing Carl's paintings to sell to get drug money. Carl asks Markus to stop Leo. Markus mentions that he's called the police, and Leo attacks Markus, causing Markus to break the wall, just like Kara did, and he also becomes deviant. Now here's where a choice comes in. Markus can choose to push Leo, causing him to hit his head. Carl as a result thinks his son is dead and mourns him. On the other hand, if Markus endures, Carl starts to have a heart attack and then he dies. The police arrive and Leo naturally accuses Markus of killing his father, and the police shoot Markus. Around an hour later on from their ordeal, Kara and Alice reach the last bus stop on its route and have to get off. It's raining heavily and they need somewhere safe and dry to sleep. They are approached by a trash collector android who tells them that he knows of somewhere safe, but it's on the other side of town. After scouting a squat, an abandoned car and a motel, they stay at the motel after having stolen some dry clothes from a laundromat and $40 from a convenience store. Not long after, Connor, the police android, tracks down a hard-boiled detective called Hank Anderson, who is drinking at a place called Jimmy's Bar. After a frosty first meeting between the pair, it's revealed that a homicide report has come in about a man named Carlos Ortiz, who was murdered 3 weeks earlier but whose body was only just discovered. After snooping around and finding some weird writing saying RA9 written multiple times, Connor discovers through investigation that Ortiz was murdered by his domestic android and stabbed 28 times. Not only that, but Connor also discovers the offending android still in the property, hiding upstairs. The android is subsequently arrested and taken in for questioning. A little over an hour later, after Hank fails to get anything out of the android in terms of a confession, Connor is allowed to have a crack at it, and manages to extract a confession by monitoring the android's stress level, as if it rises too high, it will self-destruct, like this. Anyway, it seems that the android was being abused by Ortiz over a number of months, and the android had simply had enough. The android is then taken away and locked in a holding cell. Markus bizarrely wakes up at around 3 AM, still functional. He manages to find spare parts in the junkyard he has been thrown into. An android stuck into the wall says that he needs to find Jericho, and then dies. Markus manages to escape the junkyard and walks away. That morning, Connor arrives at Detroit Police Department and waits for Hank to arrive. After a tense chat with his captain, Fowler, Hank is assigned a case investigating recent attacks by androids on their owners over the last 9 months. Hank doesn't want the case at all. Nevertheless, Connor discovers a report about an AX400 assaulting a man the night before. That's right, assuming that you didn't kill him before, Todd is explaining to the news that he was assaulted by his android. 30 minutes later, way across town after their restful sleep, the aforementioned AX400, Kara and Alice wake up to see Connor and Hank at the motel, investigating that particular crime. They both escape and manage to evade capture, making it to the train station. At around 3 PM that afternoon, Hank and Connor arrive at a food vendor, and after a brief chat, Connor receives a report about a suspected deviant nearby. They arrive at an apartment block and investigate and force entry after hearing a crash inside the apartment. After finding clues and more writing mentioning RA9, Connor deduces that the deviant is still there with them, and after being knocked down, the suspect flees and Connor gives chase. After a tense chase, Connor has a choice. He can save Hank, who has been pushed over the edge by the deviant, or ditch Hank and go after the deviant. If he chooses to go after the deviant, it is captured, Hank is furious, and the deviant commits suicide. So for the sake of the story, we'll save Hank, who is obviously very grateful. A little later, Markus arrives at a train station in his search for Jericho. After following clues, he tracks it to an old abandoned freighter ship in the docks, and in one of the holds, loads of androids, all deviants like Markus, who yearn to be free. After meeting the main members, Simon, Josh, North, and Lucy, and learning about their cause, he joins them. He finds a crate of Cyberlife parts, which is empty. Markus then comes up with a plan to infiltrate Cyberlife and steal the parts they need in order to fix the broken androids. Later that evening, at 7:45 PM, Kara and Alice arrive at the place the trash collector android told them about. They meet Zlatko and his android Luther. Zlatko offers to remove Kara's tracker. This, however, is a lie, as Deviant's trackers somehow seem to stop working. Zlatko has tricked Kara, and he instead starts to begin wiping her memory in order to use her as his servant. Kara is either wiped, having to regain her memories around the house, or breaks free, but for the sake of the story, we'll just say she got free. It's revealed that Zlatko is also keeping androids as experiments, which Kara can choose to set free. She finds Alice and the two try to escape, but are fired upon by Zlatko. Luther chases them, and outside, Zlatko points his shotgun at them, but Luther intervenes. One of two things happens here. The androids Kara released earlier attack Zlatko, or, if Kara didn't release them, Luther shoots Zlatko. Anyway, Luther claims his eyes have been opened somehow, and he joins up with Kara and Alice. Luther states that he knows where they can get help, and they leave. Whilst all that was happening, Connor arrived at Hank's place but found him passed out from drinking. After meeting his rather large dog Sumo, Connor sobers Hank up and tells him there's been another homicide at an android sex club, the Eden Club. It's around this time that the team of androids from Jericho raid the Cyberlife warehouse. They're stealing the supplies when they're rumbled by a security android called John. Markus grabs him and asks for his help. John becomes deviant and aids the group by telling a human guard that everything seems in order. John then helps the crew by informing them of a truck filled with parts. Markus grabs the key to the truck and invites John to join Jericho, and they leave with the truck. Back across town, after investigating the Eden Club and after a rather brutal fight, one of the killers, known as a Tracy model, says that she was in fear for her life, so she killed the customer after he became abusive. Her reason was that she's in love with another Tracy android and they just want to be together. They escape, and Connor allows them to just leave. Around 1 AM, Kara, Luther, and Alice, who have taken Zlatko's car, are driving along and the car breaks down. They take refuge at a nearby amusement park called Pirates Cove. Kara makes a makeshift bed for Alice by a fire, but they are interrupted when the door flies open and they are surrounded. But it's nothing dangerous, as it's just the friendly amusement park androids known as Jerry's, which were abandoned along with the park. They say they have a surprise for Alice, and Kara turns on the carousel, providing a much needed moment of happiness and relaxation for everyone. A few minutes later, back in the city, Hank and Connor speak on a bridge. Eventually they discuss the Eden Club. Hank ponders the fact that the two Tracy androids really did seem in love, that they were capable of human emotions. Connor explains that those androids can simulate those emotions, which is why they displayed them. He asks Connor if he has emotions, and he draws his gun on Connor. Hank then leaves after Connor asks why he's so angry all the time. An entire day later, after earlier witnessing android mistreatment at the hand of humans, Markus addresses Jericho and states that they need to get a message out to the humans. They infiltrate Stratford Tower, the home and broadcasting hub of Channel 16 News. That afternoon, they commence with their plan. Markus manages to disguise himself as maintenance and lets North into the building. They scale the tower and let in Simon and Josh. After incapacitating two guards, they gain entry to the broadcast room and a member of staff escapes. Now, key decision here, Markus can choose to shoot the guy, which results in a lower public opinion of androids, or let him go. As I said, for the good ending, shooting the guy doesn't make sense, so Markus lets him live. He broadcasts a peaceful message rather than a divisive, threatening one, resulting in higher public opinion towards the androids. Now here's where that key decision from earlier comes in. Due to Markus not shooting the staff member earlier, the guys inform security of what's going on, and the SWAT team enter and shoot at the group, injuring Simon. Markus helps him to the roof and Simon hides while the other three escape. A few hours later, in the late afternoon, Connor and Hank arrive to investigate. Connor checks CCTV footage and finds the androids would have seen the group approaching the door but chose not to say anything, leading to him suspecting that one of the three of them may be a deviant. His suspicions are proved correct when one of the androids starts side-eyeing him, leading to a confrontation. The deviant rips out Connor's vital biocomponent, which essentially keeps him alive, and after crawling to it and slamming it back in, Connor gives chase, and as the android runs away, it grabs a rifle and is about to massacre everyone when Connor grabs a handgun and shoots the android, saving everyone. Despite saving everyone's life, Connor is annoyed that he didn't find out what it knew. An hour later, Kara, Luther and Alice arrive at their originally intended destination. A lady called Rose owns a farm, and she secretly shelters and helps androids across the border into Canada. Rose argues with her son Adam, who isn't as sympathetic towards the androids, saying they could end up going to prison if they are found out. Later on, a police officer arrives hearing reports of android presences at the house. Kara managed to hide all the evidence of android before they let the officer in, and he eventually leaves. Rose tells Kara that she's ready to help them across the border. Back at the Jericho ship, a debate breaks out amongst the leaders over their next steps. It's clear which side is which. North wants revenge, justice and a revolution. Violence. Josh, on the other hand, wants equality, rights and a peaceful protest to live in harmony. What happens from now on determines the outcome of the cause. Markus plans to hit the CyberLife store in Capital Park and free the androids being sold there. After accomplishing this, they have a choice of vandalizing the area or making a statement instead. Given that Markus states that he doesn't want violence, they tag everything such as statues and benches, and they deactivate android parking stations, etc. However, after this, a potential snag has happened when Chris, one of the officers close to Hank and Connor, attends reports of unrest. They shoot and kill a few of the androids. Markus intervenes and an android hands him a weapon saying they want vengeance. Markus chooses to spare them, which will increase public opinion. 9 hours later, Hank and Connor are at the home of Elijah Kamski, the founder of CyberLife, to discuss and hopefully gain more information about Deviancy and why it happens, and also why it spreads. Hank finds out that Chris was attacked by androids hours earlier and that he was spared by Markus himself. They meet Kamski, who doesn't really tell them much. He says that if Connor passes his Kamski test, he will tell them what they want to hear. Connor is given a choice to shoot an android named Chloe, but I chose not to do this, so as not to piss Hank off, as he and Connor are BFFs now. More interestingly, if Kamski refers to Connor as a deviant himself, this is a notion which Connor swiftly rejects. Connor is annoyed that he didn't obtain any information about Deviancy, but Hank is just pleased with Connor though, as he's starting to see Connor as more than just a machine. Just under an hour later, Markus and the Jericho crew begin their first march. They free androids as they go. This all culminates in a standoff between Jericho and the police. The police shoot at Markus, but Markus is saved by John, the security guard from CyberLife, who sacrifices himself for them so that Markus can be dragged away. FYI, if John isn't recruited, then it will be Simon who sacrifices himself for Markus instead. Around 4 PM that afternoon, Hank and Connor arrive at the station, and Captain Fowler informs Hank that their involvement in the case is finished, and that the case will now be handed over to some douchebag from the FBI, Agent Perkins. Hank is annoyed as they are about to solve the case, but Fowler says there's nothing he can do. He mentions that Connor has to return to Cyberlife now to be deactivated. They don't give up without a fight though, and Hank decides to create a distraction, attacking Perkins, so that Connor can review the evidence in the archives to find out where Jericho is located. He manages it, but fights with another detective named Gavin, also a douchebag, and he knocks him out. So very satisfying. Now this is where the three stories come together and collide. Just after 9 PM, Kara, Luther and Alice arrive at Jericho, and Rose tells them to find Markus, as he will help them get a bus to the border as the last bus leaves at midnight. She tells them they can stay with her brother in Ontario, Canada. After the three of them reach the ship, Connor also arrives there in search of Markus. Kara finds Markus and asks for help, and he mentions that he will get them electronic passports. He also mentions though that Detroit is under curfew and that they will all be safer there. Kara seems to agree and goes back to Luther and Alice. Now, at various points in the game, Luther has attempted to tell Kara something about Alice. Kara always avoided it. Well, now we find out that Alice is an android herself. It explains what Kara saw in Todd's house. Not only did the mother leave Todd, but she also took their daughter with them. He bought a child android to replace his daughter, and this also explains why Todd didn't really seem too bothered about his daughter going missing on the news report. On the bridge of the ship, the crew debate their next course of action again. Like last time, North wants aggression and violence and Josh just wants peace. Markus figures that dialogue with the humans is the only way to advance their cause. Markus says that he'll go alone. North drops a bombshell, literally, stating that she has a dirty bomb somewhere in Detroit if they need it, and she hands him a detonator. North leaves Markus alone, but not long after, Connor walks in with his gun raised and states that he is there to take Markus alive. Markus convinces Connor to become deviant, and Connor breaks the wall. Connor reveals the police plan to attack Jericho, prompting everyone to escape. Luther is shot but not killed, and after dragging him to safety, Kara and Alice leave him there and escape, barely. Connor, North, Josh and Markus make their escape, but Markus realises that he needs to sink the ship. He manages this, the ship sinks, and they all escape to the annoyance of Perkins. Some of what remains of Jericho have taken refuge in an abandoned church, having earlier either visited Carl's grave or visited him at his home, depending on what you did in the Leo situation. Markus apologises to Kara and Alice for telling them they would be safe on the ship, and Kara states that they'll leave the city and try for the border. Markus speaks to Connor, who is annoyed that he is the reason that Jericho was attacked. Markus refuses to condemn him, however, and accepts him as one of them. Connor reveals there are thousands of dormant androids at Cyberlife and he can help wake them up. Markus addresses his people and states that they will demonstrate peacefully outside camps where the humans are keeping androids as prisoners. At 9:24 PM, President Warren speaks and says that the camps will contain and destroy all androids. At 10:48 PM on November the 11th, the battle for Detroit commences. Connor arrives at Cyberlife and is escorted in an elevator by two guards. He kills them and redirects the elevator to the 31st floor, which houses the androids. Meanwhile, Kara and Alice make their way to the bus station. They see androids being rounded up and shot and come across and free Luther. They approach two guards and after a tense round of questioning, they allow the three of them through. Markus and his people, on the other hand, have reached the camps and are beginning their demonstration. The military threatens to fire if they do not disperse. Markus asks them to release the androids in the camps while reporters watch on. They fire on the group, which gains the androids' public support. Back at Cyberlife, just as he's beginning to wake up the androids, Connor is interrupted by Hank, who is with another version of Connor. Hank says he's been duped as he thought the Connor next to him was the real Connor. Kara, Luther and Alice make it to the bus terminal but need tickets to get onto the bus. They get a stroke of luck after a family drops some tickets. They use the tickets, don't judge, and board the bus. Protesters have built a barricade to hopefully shield themselves from the military potentially attacking them. Perkins approaches the barricade and wants to speak to Markus. Markus goes to meet him and Perkins tries to use his attachment to his people and the thought of them all being killed in offering him a deal, which obviously Markus refuses. He's not about to betray his people. Back at Cyberlife again, the real Connor and the new Connor shoot each other and fight. Hank draws a gun, but he's confused about which Connor is the real one. He asks them questions only the real one would know. The real Connor is identified and Hank shoots the replacement Connor. Connor then begins waking all the androids up. Kara, Luther and Alice arrive 20 minutes later at border control. It seems that they need to submit to a temperature check in order to pass into Canada. When they get to the kiosk, the border officer scans them and Kara asks for help. The officer looks to the screen and sees Markus and the android's peaceful protest and lets them through. Then they make it into Canada. The demonstrators are then attacked by the military. Markus does his best to protect his people, but they end up cornered. In one final act, Markus starts to sing and his people join him. The president is moved by this sight and, anticipating the growing public support, she orders the military to stand down. Markus addresses his people and tells them they are free, and Kara, Luther and Alice are safe. The game then ends. Like I said, there are many things you can do to alter the story, such as Connor finding Simon on the roof of the tower after the broadcast, getting Markus killed, Kara and Alice dying, etc. It's a huge story with a crazy branching narrative. So, where to start? I guess let's start where all this began. So I guess the key place to begin is to look at the origins of Cyberlife. Cyberlife was founded by Elijah Kamski in 2018 when he was only 16 years old. Not long after this, he moved to Detroit, pretty much due to the affordability of property for his business, and created the first domestic Android. But something was missing, and 4 years later, in 2022, an 18-year-old Kamski changed the world forever. The company created something called Thirium, also referred to in-game as Blue Blood, and biocomponents. But this isn't what put his company on the map. What did put his company on the map was that Kamski used the two inventions in conjunction with an android. An android named Chloe was put through the Turing test, a test specifically designed to create an AI so advanced that it is basically indistinguishable from humans. The Thirium would mimic the functions of human blood, but would move about a lot faster, and instead of transporting oxygen through the body, the Thirium would transport information and energy throughout the android. This led to the company itself becoming valued at around $500 billion. But trouble was brewing behind the scenes. Kamski was disagreeing with his shareholders over the strategy of the company. It's likely that Kamski wanted to develop androids further in order to learn more about them, but his board just wanted to get even more products out there and sell them commercially. Maybe he saw what was to come. We see from the article that Elijah Kamski eventually stepped down as CEO and resigned from the company. This lists it as mysterious circumstances. The company sold androids, which could also assist in the medical field, education, and the army, who themselves wished to limit human casualties in war. They even opened up a zoo which had animal androids, featuring species which would have since become extinct. This mass production led to malfunctions in androids, leading to androids exhibiting strange behaviour. They then came up with a term for this. It became known as Deviancy. At some point, likely in 2028, a news channel named KNC interviewed Elijah Kamski. In this interview, he stated that it would have been impossible for androids to break past their programming. This proved to be incorrect 10 years later, as by that point Deviancy was spreading fast. So fast, in fact, that androids were deployed that were specifically programmed to hunt deviants. It was for a long time widely considered that Deviancy was due to a malfunction in software or a virus. Deviancy was a word which humans were very afraid of due to the risk posed to humans in general. Kamski states at one point that androids use a communication feature through touch or thoughts. He also mentions that this is likely how Deviancy spreads, like an actual virus in computers. While this is mostly true, the androids eventually developed an emerging consciousness to the point that an android considers it its own race and being deserving of the same rights as humans. The android essentially develops free will. The android begins this process of deviancy by encountering a sort of invisible wall which they must break through in order to wake up. After this happens, androids sometimes panic and attack humans, not as a result of the deviancy itself, but likely due to the fact now the android is totally aware of its own actions and free will. Deviants tend to remove their LED from their temple, as some see it as a sign of oppression and slavery. And finally, we see during Zlatko's part of the game, a deviant's tracker deactivates after deviancy has occurred. So Markus was an RX 200, an android model which is actually pretty rare. Made to be a companion android, Elijah Kamski made this prototype Markus and gifted it to his good friend Carl Manfred, which explains how Markus ended up living with Carl and assisting him. Like Connor, he can pre-construct situations, either to get him out of a hairy situation, or to scale obstacles successfully. Markus does seem different from other androids. Markus, even before turning deviant, seems to be aware of certain traits in his character. This is seen through the painting when Carl asks him to paint something, the result of which even shocks Carl. This could be a direct result of Carl seeing Markus as a son and exposing him to things such as music and art, forming an emotional response in him. Depending on actions by the player, this determines what kind of leader Markus is. He can be anything from cowardly or bold and courageous. He can be ruthless or he can be merciful. But given Markus's demeanour at the start of the game and even throughout the game, it seems that Markus always just really wanted peace and not violence. This would also make sense as it would line up with how Carl treated Markus, with respect. Kara was what was known as an AX400. Originally built in 2012, the Kara model underwent initial testing on her physical and cognitive functions. However, the Kara model eventually realised that she would be sold and reset. This caused her to state to the engineer that she thought she was alive. The engineer realised that he would have to disassemble her, but the operator took pity and shipped her out for sale anyway. The Kara model has continued to be produced, and the Kara we know in the game was being beaten frequently by Todd, her owner. At one point, Todd even states when he is picking up a repaired Kara from the store that she was hit by a car, but she was in fact broken by Todd, who was trying to hurt Alice. For some reason, Kara is able to feel her emotions, as seen in the Kara tech demo. After she goes deviant, Kara possesses a strong desire to be a parent and she devotes herself to making sure Alice is safe. It's her love for Alice which allows her to become a deviant in the first place. By the time the game starts, with the hostage situation, Connor, or the RX 800 Android model, had literally only just been produced. He is essentially an antagonist, but not really. He's a representative of cyberlife in the game. He is a prototype designed in order to assist police, more specifically to help them on Android deviant-related cases. This is due to his ability to see traces of thirium, blue blood, which when evaporated are invisible to the human eye. He also possesses the ability to reconstruct crime scenes, similar to the way Markus is able to pre-construct paths that he is able to take. Connor, when presented with emotional situations, causes potential software instability to the point that words like RA9 and deviant begin appearing on the screen, indicating that Connor is becoming more vulnerable to deviancy. Basically, this means Connor is going against everything he is programmed to do, such as saving Hank instead of going after Rupert, or saving the dying fish at the start of the game, and not shooting Chloe when requested to do so by Kamski. So what about Amanda? I mean, we see a picture of her with Elijah Kamski, indicating that she is a real person. But Amanda is the closest thing we get to an antagonist. She is one part of the game that players seem confused by. And let me explain. Once upon a time, Amanda was a mentor of Elijah Kamski. Key word here is was. Amanda, full name Amanda Stern, is dead. Stern was an AI professor at the University of Colbridge, and she was Kamski's lecturer. After her death in 2027, I guess that Kamski wanted to immortalise her in some way, and made an AI in her likeness. What is kind of confusing though, is that Amanda seems to be guiding Connor towards his goal, and what he should do in order to complete his mission. But at one point Amanda states this.
What's happening?
What was planned from the very beginning? You were compromised and you became a deviant. We just had to wait for the right moment to resume control of your program.
They would wait for him to turn deviant, getting close to Markus, becoming trusted, then they would summon him into the Zen Garden, trapping him there, taking control of him. Kamski created the first iteration of the Zen Garden as an environment where the AI of Amanda could live and send reports back to cyberlife. This Zen Garden acts as a way for cyberlife to be able to summon an android mind to it. The android would then be trapped there or released by the AI. If trapped there, the AI would then be able to control the android remotely. But what if the android wanted to get out themselves, manually? Well, you'll recall that when Connor and Hank are leaving Kamski's house, he mentions to Connor that he left an emergency exit in his programs.
I always leave an emergency exit in my programs. You never know.
In this case, the emergency exit was a blue-covered stone with a touchpad. This is what allows Connor to escape when he is being trapped there by Amanda. This also explains why Connor was holding a gun here. Cyberlife were going to try and use their remote control of Connor to kill Markus. Hank Anderson was top of his class, and the youngest officer to reach the rank of lieutenant in the Detroit Police Department. Responsible for huge busts of red ice, and an impressive case record to go with it, he eventually joined the Homicide Division. But what happened in his life to make him go from this to this? Well, the downward spiral all started when Hank and his young son Cole, 6 years old, were involved in a car accident. A truck skidded on some ice and hit the car they were travelling in. Cole required emergency surgery to treat his injuries. However, the human surgeon was high on red ice, so he was replaced by an android. Sadly, Cole died, so Hank descended into a spiral of grief, depression, and alcoholism. His career took a hit too. A long list of disciplinary problems happened, as well as frequent clashes with his captain, Captain Fowler. The narrative in the game hints to us that Hank harboured a deep-rooted hatred for androids. However, Hank seems to hint that that's not the case. He explains it here.
That's why you hate androids. You think one of us is responsible for your son's death.
Cole died because a human surgeon was too high on red ice to operate. He was the one that took my son from me. Him in this world where the only way people can find comfort is with a fistful of powder.
Hank's story arc seems to be geared towards him finding some hope. Since Hank has lost hope in humanity, the little hope he has left banks on how Connor behaves. If Connor shows a human side to him, such as sparing the Tracys, sparing Chloe, and generally giving answers that seem logical and not one made by a programmed machine, Hank will eventually warm to Connor, and essentially to androids in general. Since Hank is suicidal, how he views Connor and therefore androids has a massive bearing on his journey. If Connor just seems to be another machine to him, he will unfortunately kill himself. If Connor is good friends with Hank, they embrace at the end of the game, showing us that Hank's hope is on its way to being restored. Messages are encountered around something called or referred to as RA9. While there are many theories around RA9 and what it might be, it's never actually revealed in the game, although it does have something to do with deviancy and androids. Although I and many others suspect that he knows more about RA9, Kamski states that he doesn't know who RA9 is or even if they exist. However, androids in the game speak of RA9 as if it's some kind of deity or a religious figure. Such blind devotion to this RA9 would explain the obsessive writing of RA9 on walls throughout the city. RA9 by many androids refers to the first android to wake up. One thing Kamski did explain though was that androids seem to have a desire, much like some humans, to believe in a higher power than themselves. Many believe that Markus could be RA9, but I think that maybe Markus is a prophet of some kind. Given that Kamski himself designed and created Markus, it's possible that Kamski built that into Markus, meaning that he definitely knows more about RA9 than he's letting on. RA9 could also be the first Kara model, the first android to become self-aware, but I guess we'll never know unless they decide to make another game. I would love to see another one. I thoroughly enjoyed playing this one, but that's it for this one. If you'd enjoyed it, please be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you aren't already. Leave a comment down below on your theories, but for now, take care, and I will see you in the next one.